Welcome to the No BS Short-Term Rental Podcast, an unfiltered look into the global vacation and short-term rental industry.
I'm Mateo Bradford.
And I'm John Stokinger.
And this is our podcast. We bring the right people to the table at the right time, giving you an inside view and take on the short-term rental industry like no other podcast can.
Good morning, Mateo. How are you?
Fantastic, brother. How are you?
A new week. Great weekend. Tons of rain here in the Midwest. It's we're supposed to get another 2 to 3 inches on Friday. Shit's flooding. It's crazy.
Oh man, I was in New York freezing my ass off. It was so cold.
Wait. Crimea River, right? You're in New York doing what?
Some bucket list stuff, but right? It was worth the cold.
Seeing Nas at MSG.
Nas at the Garden, yeah. First time at the Garden. First time seeing Nas at home. That was a fun trip.
Dude, so you shared those pics with me. Fire.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was living vicariously through you, after the fact, just checking out those pics and the videos. So I'm a little jealous. I'm not going to lie, but it's all good. We have a great guest today, season 4, episode 5. A cat we've been wanting to get on the podcast for a while, and we actually had an opening, and he agreed last minute to jump on with us. So we appreciate it. The one and only Arthur Colker of StayFi. Thanks so much for joining us, Arthur.
Thanks for having me.
No, excited.
Awesome that we got to put this time together. So
no, yeah, totally. It's interesting because I was thinking back this morning, but I was kind of looking over your profile and kind of refreshing myself with StayFi. And I was thinking back to when we met, and I think it was my first event when I was with Track. And it was up in Vermont, New England.
And that's conference.
And the first time I met you, I was invited to dinner, and we were sitting dinner, and it was an interesting dinner if I remember correctly. But it was I think David Cornbrith was with us as well, who's no longer in the industry anymore, but he was at the time with Explory, VP of Sales. You remember that conference?
I do remember it, and I remember it was just freezing cold in Cape Cod somewhere.
Yeah, it was interesting, but I know absolutely nothing of Track. I was they're like, here, go do this conference. But that was the first conversation I think I ever had with you. And I'm like, oh, you guys are onto something. It's kind of neat. We always talk about this. Why hospitality for you? What was it that brought you in? I kind of see, and correct me if I'm wrong, you got some interesting things on your in your history, and but the first thing I saw was head of growth for Hoteli. Is it Hotelied?
Yes, startup no longer exists, but that was a OTA in the hotel space that tried. It was, I think, a little bit ahead of its time. It basically, you would connect all your social media accounts to the tool, and then hotels could target you based on your profile. So now there's actually some newer companies that are focused on influencer marketing and a marketplace to target those people and bring them to your hospitality destination. But that was kind of what it was trying to do. And I think it was just a little bit before its time, but it was definitely a super interesting concept.
Was that your first foray into this space? Was that your first dipping your toes in?
Yeah. So, I actually worked there when I was in business school. And it was my first hospitality oriented job, let's say. And then after business school, I took a little time off from hospitality space and actually worked for a healthcare startup. But all my kind of career has all been centered around marketing and growth for brands. So, working with brands in all sorts of different industries. And then I happened to get to StayFi, started working with a vacation rental management company as a consultant. And that's kind of how I got introduced to this awesome industry, which clearly I loved enough to stick around and start a company in.
You're based out of New York, right?
Yeah.
So you get an opportunity, you're working with a property management company, you're helping them out with this thing. And did you just happen at that point to be like, all right, we're going to go ahead and hook you up with some great Wi-Fi shit. And I know what I'm doing. And then it just came together holy shit, I'm onto something. How did that evolve from I'm working with a property management company and helping them do this to holy shit, we got gold here in our hands?
Yeah, I mean, I think like many, especially newer property management companies that kind of came after the rise of Airbnb, they grew up in an environment where, they didn't need to develop a brand and they could source all of their bookings from OTAs. So, I mean, when they hired me, they, were 99% channel bookings and they wanted to start developing a brand and drive guest loyalty. And so as a consultant, the first thing I asked for is, well, how can we target people that have stayed in your properties before? Because those folks are going to be a lot easier to get to come back, especially when you have like 150 homes that sleep like an average of 12 guests. That's a lot of people. Then, trying to do Google ads and convert people on a website for a brand I've never heard of or experienced when they already have trust in, a big short-term rental OTA, right? They're like, well, we have no data because, we don't get any marketing data from people that book through the channels, right? So my initial intent was to find a way to seamlessly collect the data. So that was a problem I wanted to solve. And so I looked for solutions that would do that for them. So we looked at all sorts of different things in the marketplace, like digital guidebooks, in-home tablets, existing Wi-Fi solutions that were available for, coffee shops like Beambox, which is like an awesome product for, you know, quick service restaurants, right? But those products are designed for that vertical. Or there are some Wi-Fi products that are designed for like any vertical, but don't do a good job of short-term rentals for all sorts of reasons. So at the end of the day, it came to the fact that there was no product that met the need of this customer. And so I just need to get a sense of, were there other people in a similar situation? And then would it be worthwhile building something that could do this for them? And the answer to both those questions was yes. So that's kind of how the idea for StayFi germinated with that particular consulting client I had.
That's fantastic. But thinking about that, again, so you have this idea and you're a consultant, you're doing your other job as well. Like there has to be a point where you're like, fuck it, I'm doing this on my own. I got what was that turning point for you? Because obviously you found success with this, or your client found success with this, well, actually, let's backtrack. What was success for that client? Like, was it just, okay, we can retarget because we've acquired these emails and now are you building out like email marketing campaigns and
Yeah. So I
retouches
did
and
the
stuff like that?
whole end-to-end marketing for them. I helped them build a website. I helped them not just set up email, but like Facebook and Instagram retargeting for their guests, right? I did the traditional, like full marketing stack consulting. I actually helped them develop their brand, which came out to be Heirloom. So it was kind of like approaching their business from all sorts of angles, looked at their guest personas, what's the communication plan before arrival? What's the consistent voice around every touch point, right? And so, I really thought about the data collection and marketing as just kind of a natural piece in this guest journey, where while we may be interacting with the booker, we're going to then start interacting from the brand voice to the whole guest party. And then how do we continue to engage them after the stay and educate them on the value of booking direct and the fact that as a property management company, we manage not just homes in New Orleans, but in Savannah and Nashville and Scottsdale and all the other places that they're located, right? So there's a lot of introducing the brand as a concept, which is challenging in this space because people say, we booked an Airbnb. We know property managers that say, I manage Airbnbs, which is like really my least favorite thing that people say to them, like, you really don't.
Right.
But that's a whole other story, right? So,
It's
there's a
it's
very
all part of the
holistic
story,
marketing
right?
approach. Yeah. Yeah.
We talk about brand a ton on our podcast and it's interesting and how important it is, but how many property managers don't necessarily, it doesn't resonate with them for whatever reason. I think over time we're starting to get that snowball effect there. The whole book direct movement is helped, but at the same time, if you look at data, it's still,
With the
where
decline still, like
yeah.
percentage of direct bookings overall are in decline.
Yeah,
And
it's going the wrong direction, even with all the input. What is that saying? It's just saying that these large OTAs are still doing the job that they're setting out to do, and
It's,
it
it's
makes
I have a,
what you're doing even more important, right?
I
yeah,
agree with that 100%. And in your mindset, it's interesting to hear you say that it's going in decline. when there's more of a push for this idea of getting to direct bookings. There's more avenues toward direct booking, right? And so we've highlighted that this is a path that property managers should be going to. You have conferences, you have everything that's going towards building out this strategy, right? And you have tools that even people who have been dependent on just the Airbnb platform for short-term rentals now have tools to actually build that out. And I know the angst is still there. Most people hate dealing with the platforms in the ways that they have to deal with them and would much rather get the direct bookings. My question, I guess to you specifically, is it based on the push that we see that the industry is going after smaller operators who don't know that and are just dependent on maybe one or two channels, and so like that's their lifeline. They don't even think direct booking because it seems like the bigger companies and the bigger brands in our space are have a focus, have a team, have SEO, SEM,
Yep.
all these other tools, right? So it should be working for them.
Well, I'd say there's a lot of different things going on. I would say from an overall industry standpoint, we are seeing a lot of, especially in the last 2 years, a lot of people booking short-term rentals for the first time. And they are going to go to the brand that they trust, which is Airbnb, typically, maybe Vrbo, and then internationally, it could be some other channels, right? Like a tsunami of people, right, that are entering as guests for the first time.
Right.
And we're not like in the budget that Airbnb and Vrbo spend on marketing is just astronomically higher than what, short-term rental managers can compete with. So,
Wait, you don't want to go ahead and sponsor a Super Bowl ad?
no,
Yeah.
I think we're doing okay. Um, yeah, so that's one thing. It's just influx of
Yeah.
guests and who they trust. And they have no idea. Think I'm booking Airbnb. They don't know what a property manager is. They've never heard of a short-term rental brand. Like, how people have heard of a Casa or Sonder? There are two people, and those are obviously the biggest ones in the United States, right? So that's one angle. I think the other thing is more on the who's starting short-term rental businesses. A lot of people are starting an Airbnb business, and that's how it's advertised to them by a lot of influencers in the space, which I think is fine because Airbnb is going to be a source of if you want to get bookings, and you're starting, that's obviously where you're going to go, right? So I don't think it's like a bad thing that, people, are introducing the industry to new potential business operators that way as a great first place to start. So that's kind of like on the supply side, getting a lot of new entrants that obviously go to the brands, and on the guest side, new entrants go to the brands. And then for the big property managers, they're like trying to fight this trend because while they may have a website and they're spending ads on search, so, all the OTs are spending on the same search terms. So they're fighting them there. And that's a very hard battle to win.
And
So I think there's a lot of different factors coming together as to why we still see channels becoming more dominant as the primary booking source overall.
But isn't that the part of the problem though? Like part of the problem is, all right, I get the SEO, I get the search and wanting to get direct bookings that way, but I would be spending more money on the people that I've had and have touched, right? It's more of like who you've touched, because then that's taken away. At least that's one barrier that's gone. They've been
Yeah.
with you. If you've done a good job, they know you, though now there's somewhat, there's a level of familiarity to the brand, right?
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's definitely our hypothesis, right? Is
Right.
that advertising to someone that's never stayed with you is going to be really hard because the brand trust with channels is incredibly high. Like people trust Airbnb and Vrbo with some obviously complications around not every listing may be represented factually and who is managing this and is it like
Right.
fake photos and all sorts of other stuff we know that goes on there, shenanigans, but generally people are going to trust those listing sites. And if you're advertising as, so-and-so Key West rentals and your website, let's be honest, using your PMS website builder and it doesn't look as professional as maybe we would hope, it's going to be really hard to convert someone through there if they've never heard of you, have no idea who you are, right? So obviously once someone's in a home, booked through a channel, experienced it, those are the people that are going to be easiest to convert to come back and book directly. And those are the ones that StayFi is laser focused on educating about booking direct in the future. So.
I love this direction because if you think about it from, you got two different, buckets of like property managers that are and how they're attacking and how they want to go ahead and attract bookings. Um, I would probably say that the majority of property managers, this is my opinion, don't care how the bookings are coming in. They, because if it is a, coming from a channel, they're upcharging or they're covering the cost of that channel anyways, and they're actually making more money on that booking than if it was coming direct. Now, depending on the size of the property manager. So with that though, I love that, if they're going to spend marketing dollars on booking direct, the retargeting an approach as opposed to pay-per-click SEO and going out and promoting their website, but more from like email retargeting and text retargeting and that side, prior guests, I think is super smart because these are guests that they can trust. These are guests that they've had that they know are also gonna market for them. Susie and her family stays every year in, so and so's property, and they have a great time and they get a 10% off if they rebook it during this month for the same stay that they did last year. They're going to tell their friends about it. So I love your approach. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that, I talk to property managers all the time and there's half of them are like, they're totally fine with, 90% OTA bookings. And I'm like, oh, I'm more of a 70-30, 60-40 split is kind of where I think is a better percentage of direct to, OTA or OTA to direct, but I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, let's talk about the money side first, because I think that's not the right approach. Is to just have your listings be the same price on your website, just minus the OTA fees. I think you should capture part of that, right? If you're spending money on marketing, both email, search, StayFi, a guest guide, whatever's money you're spending on marketing, you should be recapturing, with kind of your own OTA fee, whatever that is in your mind, what percentage makes sense. No, obviously you still want the delta between what the price is on the channel and your own website, but you should not give that all away, in my opinion, right? You should
Yeah,
be
100.
capturing
I
part of
agree
that
with
for
you
yourself.
100%. And maybe I was calculating that in my head as part of just, the normal cost to book direct.
Yeah, I mean, I think you should look at the costs and marketing costs. The OTA, like, that's how hotels look at it, right? Like, because hotels enforce rate parity and so do the channels a lot more. So like the price on booking.com and the price on the hotel website are typically actually the same. And then the, marketing cost to acquire the guest is significant, which is why large hotel chains and OTAs have had a long and fraught relationship. They've delisted and relisted and renegotiated and all sorts of crazy things to try to lower what those costs are, because they can even be larger. Like boutique hotels can be paying like 20% to booking.com, right? So those are definitely a cost to acquire a guest. I definitely think you should view them as marketing costs. And if you view them as marketing costs, right, then suddenly you realize you are spending a huge amount of money on these channels. And there's no reason why you should, once you acquire a guest through a channel, pay the channel again to acquire the same guest again, right? So I think it just takes a little bit of a mindset shift. If you view them as marketing costs, and then that's money that you can recapture if they book direct, that definitely changes, how you financially evaluate where to focus and what channels are going to produce more value for you in the long term. And then not just on the financial side, we can also talk about the value of developing a loyal audience of guests, because if there is more and more supply on these channels, as we see in certain markets, and demand stagnates or isn't rising as fast, right? They're going to become more competitive, and the pricing pressures along with that are going to happen on those certain markets, right? So having a list of loyal guests who love staying with you is going to give you a competitive advantage in the long run, because when it's a bull market and demand is surging, direct booking feels less important, right? Because you can fill all your nights on the channels. But we know that will not last forever, right? And so you need to prepare yourself
We're
for
already
leaner times,
seeing
right?
we're already seeing
We know it's
the
happening right
market
now.
we're flattening out now. It
And I
isn't
guess,
what it was.
and that's why it's really important in the kind of bigger like influx of demand time to invest in developing the loyal audience, because then when the leaner times come, your business will be much more resilient if you have a both great guest and homeowner brand, which is like a separate but related issue, right? About building homeowner loyalty through a brand, but guest loyalty as well. Then brand awareness amongst your target customer who loves and enjoys your properties, it will make your brand a lot more resilient when there is a downturn in demand through channels or more competition on channels or a combination of both, right?
It actually brings up a good point, because then it brings timing into perspective also, right? And we see this shift of the industry, technology, professional tools, all focusing on the large number of what we like to call hosts, right? Or the semi-professional manager, right? That could go either way. You're either going to build a great business, or you're tired of the hustle and you're going to either sell off to a property manager or go, stop, doing your own properties and have somebody else do it for you. So like, the sooner you start this and get this strategy in place and at least understand that you being able to keep more is one part of it, but it's also giving you the flexibility to actually do what you need to do for your business. Because a lot of what you know, dealing with the OTAs and dealing with these platforms, it's the lack of ability to do what you need to do in terms of what's best for your business, right? On that
Mhm.
side, and not having, that's where the frustration comes from. It's not just, it is about the money. It is about how much you're paying for that marketing piece, but it's also about the operational aspect of it too. And you not having a certain amount of control. If 99% of your business or 100% of your business is through the OTAs, that's a significant portion of your business that you have no control over, right?
Huge
And
risk, huge risk.
Yeah, it's eggs,
and
all
in
your
any
eggs in
other
one basket.
context, that would be ridiculous, right? So I think it's smart business, and I like that at least it seems that we're looking to expand the knowledge transfer and create it more, dynamic thinking in the business, regardless of what level you're at. I think it'll be interesting to see what those numbers are within the next couple years, especially with the amount of money that companies are spending on building brands. And is that going to translate into their direct bookings? I mean, it seems like they get it, but as the funnel goes upwards, right? Or you turn the funnel around and you're seeing, more and new operators and managers and hosts come into this space.
Yeah, I think the challenge for new operators is, or smaller operators, however you want to put it, or host owner operators that own the properties, is that you have to wear so many hats, and you're not likely to be a marketing expert, right? Or an email marketing expert. And it's very challenging. Some people are very intuitive and natural at it. And I see their websites and it's like they get building a brand and they get how to communicate it. But for other people, that's very challenging and doesn't come naturally to them. So from my perspective, like from what StayFi is doing, we're always thinking about how do we build tools and products that make it easier for owner operators or small managers, because honestly, they are our core customer base. Like most 95% of StayFi customers have less than 50 properties under management, right? And don't have dedicated marketing resources. And I think this year, that's one of our biggest focuses is we call it like marketing in a box, where everything is kind of built for you and you just have to apply your logo basically. And
Right.
we
Right,
suggest
right.
for you
Yeah.
what copy you should use and what messages you should send when. And those are the products we're building now so that we make good marketing more accessible to more people. And that's definitely a big mission of StayFi, and what I love about working with small businesses is I want to make these things that were only accessible to big brands more accessible for smaller operators, because they are you know, really the center of this industry, right? Like we talk a lot about the big property managers, but they still manage a relatively small percentage of the overall market. And most properties are with semi-professional or small owner operators.
That 10 to 99, that 10 to 75 unit count is truly it's 75% of the market. I mean, it's an insane amount of inventory or with, and I'd say it takes 10 to 50 are 70% of the market. It's these guys and gals and these people that have come into this space just ravenous about the opportunity, and next thing you know, they're like, "Oh shit, I got a property management company." They didn't even realize they had one, And now they're like, oh, I'm behind the ball. What do I need to do now? You're about to celebrate your fifth birthday, your fifth year. At or year five, I guess, is with StayFi here in May. You came in as StayFi. You're more, as a tech, right here. We're a tech. We are a solution. We are logistics to help you get from point A to point B. And now you're bringing into some like you're building out some cool marketing things that like, instead of just capture this and you could do something with it, you're like, capture this and we're going to help you do something with it. We're going to help you get from, to reach more people. And because we're professionals and this is what we do. When do you, looking back, what was like that turning point when you're like, oh yeah, StayFi's here to stay, right? you know, in the middle of all this, COVID happened, right? We talk about this all the time with startups that had come scrappy startups that are starting it, and then they're like, oh shit, COVID. Like, what are we gonna do? Is it, I think that those that are have a solid foundation and are able to go ahead and I hate, this is a way overused word, but pivot their direction and their thought process and their focus during COVID. I know we've had a conversation about what, in the past about, that was a hard, but a focused time for you. And I'm just talking in circles here, but, what was that point where you're like, I got something, we have something. I mean, because for a long time it was just you. Like,
Yeah.
you
Well,
were
I'll tell you a
StayFi.
little bit more about my philosophy behind why I did StayFi the way that I did. So, I mean, really StayFi is truly like a bootstrapped business, as in everything we built was only funded by the revenue that actually came to the business, right?
Love
So
it.
no external stakeholders for like almost 4 years. And that I think builds an incredible amount of discipline in a business where everything really has to be essential and has to drive value for the customer. Like we cannot build things that do not directly help our customers build their business, right? Or else people are not going to be willing to pay for it. I think that the pitfalls of venture capital funding is that when start a business and then suddenly someone hands you $4 million, right? It's hard to allocate that money effectively if you don't have a long kind of runway in the industry and understand what the customers really want, what's vital, what's kind of ancillary that's not going to move the needle. And you can also acquire a lot of customers through brute money, but are they going to stay around because the product can't deliver based on the promise, right? So VC
Mhm.
money can be amazing at the right time, at the right place, with the right idea, but the execution and follow through and getting everything right is so challenging. And that's why most VC-backed companies don't succeed, because they get all those things and they can't get through that time. But when they do succeed, they can become, billion-dollar unicorn companies. So the upside is insane, but there's really, really hard to execute. Bootstrapping, you kind of have to do it a certain way because you have no other choice. And that way your business is super capital efficient. And, that's why kind of during the 2020 period where a lot of our customers stopped paying, I focused totally on building a self-service product where anyone can onboard, set it up, use it, and never speak to us, because I can't hire a support person to talk
Right.
to these people, right? So it has to be self-service. Like there is no other choice, right? And then how do you figure out what the product looks like to achieve that goal, and what things are vital to make it work and what things will just complicate it or make it too difficult for people to do, right? So that was the mindset I took when it comes to building the business. Um, and why it has to work the way that it does. Because when you're a solo founder with no employees, it has to work that way or else the company will fail. Now to today, obviously, we did raise a very small amount of money, primarily from our customers, which is awesome to see them want to invest in the product, which
Mhm.
let us invest a little bit more in tech and things that we know that we need to build, things like the marketing tools. And then on the flip side, it's more data. So like our big push this year is not just let's develop the marketing in a box. And we have email and text, but how do we make it even easier and more accessible? Other side is how do we integrate more data into the marketing platform? And so that's when we're building as fast as we can, as many property management software integrations, which is challenging because the market is so fragmented. But I think we have 8 done so far. And that way we pull the data in and then let you market to it, whether you're collecting it through Wi-Fi or not. And I think that's a really important pivot for us is Wi-Fi becomes one channel to acquire guest data, but we want to hook up with your website, your property management software, other sources of data, and then provide the tools to market to all that information. So Wi-Fi becomes one channel to acquire data, and then we're providing all the tools to market to that data. And we want to augment it with all the other places that you have guest information that's valuable for you.
I'm a huge proponent and fan of data that actually matters, right? Data that you can actually or is actionable, you can do stuff with, where you can build case studies out, where where you can go ahead and, you know, we've seen this coming in and we are able to action on this, and this is the result. And this seems like a perfect platform to do so. Where some of the other data you're getting, and which is super important, like data drives everything, and we know that. And there's some great platforms out there, and we're all pulling that data as vendors in the space. We all rely on this data all day, every day, and so do property managers. But still, it's very it's a bunch of scrape data that's coming in from, OTAs, which we're trying to pull our reliance from anyway. So this data to me seems more authentic. This data seems more like focused specifically to that property management company and or hosts or whatever.
Yeah, well, this is kind of I don't know, this might be a weird analogy, but I learned this at a marketing conference once, and I really like when I did marketing, I was a big believer in this, and it's about like optimizing around the right thing, or like I don't know if you ever did a math where you have like a bunch of peaks and like you are optimizing around the wrong thing. That's not going to give you a high enough return. So I see a lot of folks that are like very focused on optimizing like conversion on their website or like click through on their email, right? But are you really focused on optimizing around the right set of data? So like you can be pulling data in from, pricing tools and great market data, and then you have like guest data. It's kind of like which data by focusing on and optimizing, like I think pricing is like an obviously super, super, super important one that I spend a lot of time on, right? But I see a lot of people wasting their time focused on data or data sets that don't really matter for their business. And then even if you move the needle, isn't going to move the needle for your overall business. So I really think it's stepping back, looking at like what thing if I spend time on is going to generate the most ROI for my business, right? And that's something I keep in mind a lot. So it's easy to get overwhelmed, but it's important to sometimes take a step back and think about, is what I'm focusing on really going to deliver the most ROI? Or should I be thinking of like a totally different project or different set of data that if I were to work on this and think about how to improve how we're handling this data or optimizing our pricing or marketing to our guests, it's not going to generate more ROI for me. So it's easy to get sucked into one narrow view, but it's always important to step back and look at holistically your business, what area is going to give you the most impact when you focus on it.
I love it. And ultimately that needle that we're as business owners that we should all be focused on is revenue, right? And
Profitability, I would say.
Profitability, right? No, I'm with you. Yeah,
revenue, look, but you can become less profitable. So
exactly, it's what you
yeah,
keep.
yeah. I mean, there's like, that's like the classic story of startups, right? It's like every dollar I bring in, I'm spending $1.20 to acquire. So actually, the faster my revenue grows, the faster I'm going to go out of business. So revenue is super important, but you have to look at what's the cost of that revenue, right? So, and I think we see that with some of the really, really big operators that are publicly traded, is that the faster they grow, the faster they lose money, which is, when you have something wrong with your business model, and that growing faster actually isn't not always a great thing, because whatever cost savings you were looking to achieve at scale are not occurring.
No,
So
100%.
let me. So that actually brings up a good question, because I don't want to just gloss over the fact, like, solo founder, startup, pulling yourself up, in it 5 years, all of those things are applause worthy for sure. So congratulations, to you on that. I think it's also suffice it to say that it's been some turbulent times, right? That you've been through, and what you were just speaking through about COVID. as a leader, as a founder, as someone that's, brought this through and literally had to kind of do it on your own, right? Like you're the antithesis to what most people say, right? Like you can't make it on your own. It's your people, it's your culture. How does your path and what you're building with StayFi, you know, how did these opportunities shape you in a way that other business owners, other people who are in your space, other founders, other people like John and I that are hustling and out here, in leadership positions, building something that we want to last, right? 5 years, 10 years. Talk to us some of the lessons you learned. Talk to us about what were the keys to success for you that have allowed you to stay in a space that's seen a
I'll
lot of
say
people
that
go.
I'd say
Yeah.
yeah, I say a lot of how I approach building the business is informed by working at other startups in the past, right?
Mm.
So I've worked at startups that did well, that failed. And I think those, like through like maybe not even my personal failure, but working in a company that failed, right? You will learn a lot about how you want to run a business and how you don't want to run a business. I think number one for me is yes, solo founder, but also highly aware of what I'm not good at or really bad at. And hiring for those very specific needs. That's like you need some level of self awareness, but you also need like a high level of delusion because in my mind, like there is no other, like I can't imagine not continuing and succeeding. Like there's no other path has ever like occurred to me over the 5 years. Like I've never said I want to stop and do something else. So you definitely need that level of a good mix of delusion, but then also self awareness to know what you need to hire people to help you do. So it's a weird mix of those two things. I think is definitely helpful, or at least for me.
Love it.
I love it. Yeah.
And let's you talked about hiring. You hired some great teammates.
Yeah.
Shout out to Talia.
Yep.
Um,
Natalia.
and what's I'm sorry, I'm totally
Oliver came from
Oliver.
Price
Thanks.
Lab.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oliver.
They're definitely like the two industry folks I hire. Yeah. And so, I mean, also big thing is this is a small industry, especially within the vendor slash large property management world. And if you don't deliver or you kind of F people over, like people talk and they'll figure it out. So, I mean, also you need to be, at least for me, I think being an honest, ethical business person that delivers on what they say they're going to do is super, super, super important. And for me, that's always number one. And obviously, like we've all dealt with some like shady characters in this industry, both vendors or property managers. And you just know, I get that like sixth sense that something isn't on the up and up. And that's
Right.
stuff I avoid like the plague, even if it may seem like easy money in the moment. Or you get the sense of like people are dipping their toes in and they're just going to leave because they're like, let's see if my product works here. And if it doesn't, I'm going to just like exit out. So it's kind of understanding like who are trustworthy, reliable partners, and then understanding like who's here just for a minute and who's going to last, right? So, and then building relationships with the people you think are going to, you can work and help each other, both deliver value and also in this space, I'd say while there is healthy competition, it's a very open market. So I don't think of competition as a threat. Like if someone says, you know what, I didn't want to invest in StayFi, I decided I want to get a digital guest guide with DAC. I'm like, fantastic, because there are 1,000 other people that don't have either product that we can go market to, right?
Right.
So there's so much open space in the industry. It's better just to continue collaborating. If you get in the mindset of like, it's me versus them, it's not
It all
true.
comes back
B,
around.
it's gonna come back around in the end, right? So
Having
it's
that
not
mindset.
personal either.
Yeah, 100%. Having that mindset has been super, important for myself and Matteo as well. Just building what we've built. Unfortunately, I haven't stayed at one company for, from the outside looking in, I kind of look like a jumper. Circumstantially, each time I'm going up the ladder. So life is good, but it's also I haven't burned any bridges, and I'll never burn bridges because that it's you're building a reputation, you're building relationships, and you're 100% true. Being able to come through and deliver on what you say you're going to deliver, and solidifying these relationships because you never know what's going to be around the corner. And competition is competition, but at the same time, that person that chose DAC instead of you, great. But in a year, it might not work out, and maybe they'll come back to you. And, and so who cares?
Or it
There's
will
so
work out and now they want to invest in a different product, right? So it's
100%. One
not,
way or another, it
yeah,
doesn't matter
yeah,
because there's so much
yeah.
opportunity. We're getting toward the end here, but I want to make sure that you do get a chance to kind of talk about, what's new for StayFi. You talked about this, marketing kind of thing in a box, but we know we're going to be seeing you at the shows. We know that, everyone's talking about you. I think I saw a social post yesterday talking, there's a conference out west, and hey, StayFi was the talk of the conference. So that's exciting, but what's new for you and what's new for your clients?
Yeah, I'd say, number one for us is integration with more third-party software. Like, obviously, we want to do integration with Direct, right? It's just there's 75 people we have to do this with. So it takes time because StayFi will position itself as a tool that you can use without the Wi-Fi component. So for us, it's like we're a guest marketing tool and we will connect to whatever data that you have, and which may include our Wi-Fi product or not. So I definitely encourage people, that's going to be like a brand shift for us, that we're not just a Wi-Fi business, that we're like a marketing company with a Wi-Fi product. But that's kind of the big communication story over the course of the year as a brand. And so I would encourage people that even if you don't want to make an investment in Wi-Fi, your homeowners don't, or you're skeptical that guests would want to do this, I think you can still come to our product and use email and text marketing with the data you already have. And then if you see success there, Wi-Fi becomes an additional source to layer on. So we're moving from a Wi-Fi company to a guest marketing company. And I think that's going to like help open up who we can attract as a customer and then help them on that journey to developing a brand and meeting them at whatever stage they're at to get there and collect more data in the end.
Love it. Where are we going to see you next? Oh,
Well, I'll
we're
be
gonna
at
see you next.
Kansas City.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. We're gonna probably do a few less conferences this year, actually. But we're gonna like double down on the big ones. So we're going bigger at Verma in Orlando because that was such a successful conference for us last year. So I spread myself a little too thin last year, and I feel like when you don't execute the conference well, then it's like, why even bother? Because you didn't bring enough people, you didn't collect the leads and do the follow up, and there's so much work around each one. Really gonna be more focused and intentional this year. And then I think, next year when we feel like we have more products to bring to market again and there's like a bigger story to tell, I think we might go big again. But it's kind of like, we'll see where we end up this year, but definitely a few less places and more focused on building out new things within StayFi to bring to market next year.
Love it. So check out our website. We're going to have a link to StayFi. You can learn more there. If you're going to the Vermas or other shows, you can go ahead and learn about StayFi and meet with Arthur and his team there. Thanks so much for joining us, man. We appreciate you.
That's been a blast.
And yes, you did look cute. So that was a reference to a conversation we had on LinkedIn, and appreciate you. And if you're watching on, YouTube, please go ahead, like, share, do what you do there. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, give us a review, give us 5 stars. Let us know what you think. We appreciate you. And thanks so much for joining us.
This podcast is a Hospitality.fm production.